Now for the bad, because there was some bad. So here's the bad. Started off with James Cleverly. Now, I wasn't totally aware of James Cleverly and who he was and what sort of person he was until the last 6 months. And I've got to be honest. Every time I've seen him, I wanted to throw things at the television because I'm yet to see him answer a question. And that's not hyperbole. I think if somebody was to say, what is your name? He would say, well, what I'm saying is some people would say that, but when I was growing up, they called me Charlie, would you believe? He just will not answer a question. Fiona Bruce asked him 3 times. She badgered him 3 times. What is Theresa May's plan B? And he started off the question by saying, well, I'll tell you what Theresa May's plan B is, before going on for 2 minutes to talk about something that was totally irrelevant. Fiona Bruce, what is the plan B then? You haven't said anything. He's like, well, if you would give me a second, I'll tell you what the plan B is. Goes on to talk for another 2 minutes, doesn't explain what the plan B is. She asks him again, well, what is the plan B? And he doesn't, he avoids the question again. He's everything that is wrong with politicians. And I'm not even talking about what he stands for here and what his policies are and what he supports, which are horrible. Just answer a question. For crying out loud, answer a question. You serve us, remember? You're answerable to us. It drives me mad when politicians do not answer questions. And like I say, Fiona Bruce did not let him off the hook, which is why she was in the good part of these videos. But here's the bad part, especially about that first episode. First of all, obviously, he's one of the bad things about it, because he didn't answer any questions, but it was brought to task by Fiona Bruce, and I think she did very well. But here is really the bad thing about last week's episode, because there were 2 questions, or 2 sort of statements in that, and they were the best 2 questions or statements, I thought, in the whole episode. And they didn't talk about either of them. I'm hoping that I've queued this up correctly. I've got the right video.
Me, with a hat on. Yes, can somebody more who understands these things better than I do explain to me what the issue is about having a second referendum? In 2015, we had an election, general election. 2 years later, it was decided that we could have another one because we needed, or someone decided that we needed a fresh mandate. Now, I recognise that that wasn't a particularly popular decision to have so many general elections, but nobody challenged the legitimacy of that vote. Nobody said this is betraying 11.3 million people who voted Conservative in 2015. The facts had changed and people are entitled to change their mind. And here we are. Just one more. We were promised sunlit uplands. Okay, I'm not going to get into.
Is it not feeling very sunny?
No,
everybody?
I don't want to get into whether people were deceived or whether people were lied to. I'm sure that the passionate Brexiteers made their points in good faith. The the voters listened to them in good faith, and they voted in good faith. But we were promised sunlit uplands, and what we've got is a dodgy deal that 80% of the population don't support, Parliament doesn't support. It's not going to get through. With respect and many apologies, listening to the voices, the political voices on the panel, they're not going to sort it out because they can't get it together. Listening to Parliament, it's a can of worms, and the only way to resolve it is to let people say, OK, if this is what we want, the dodgy deal or the no deal or something else, if that's what we want, fine, we'll deliver it. But for God's sake, tell us if what you've got now is what you thought you were going to get 2.5 years ago.
Okay, right. That gentleman made that statement and sort of question. Yeah, I suppose there wasn't a question in there, it was more of a statement, but it was ignored. They moved over it, and nobody on the panel addressed it. There was two occasions that happened in that show, and this was the first one. Now, I really wanted to hear what people would say about that. Especially the Labour MP who was there at the time, and for the life of me, Emily Thornberry's name escaped my head there for a second. But I really wanted to hear what Emily Thornberry wanted to say on it, but nobody addressed it. They just let the statement out there and nobody addressed it. I can give you what I would say to that. Well, first of all, you can't really, say, oh, they said some things that weren't true during 2016, because both sides did. Both sides painted the picture as being either the worst possible outcome with regards to those who wanted to remain, and painting the picture of the leaving the EU as the worst possible outcome, and vice versa, worst possible outcome with regards to actually stopping in the EU. They both did that. They tried to boil something that was the most complicated decision that the British electorate have ever had into a series of sound bites and slogans. 350 million on a bus. I don't remember the Irish issue being much of an issue back in 2016 during the referendum. Do you? So that obviously addresses one part of his argument, but the second part of his argument is he wants a second referendum. There's no he's got a very good case there, saying, hey, we have elections, and 2 years later we had another election. It's different with a referendum, and here's the thing. We were well aware at the time that this was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, and I do find it hilarious at some people who were saying, "Oh, we can't have another referendum because it's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity," who were also advocating for another Scottish referendum. They are actually doing those two things at the same time, believe it or not. I'm not like that, but here's the thing: it was a referendum, and we knew that the decision was going to be final. All of us knew that right at the very beginning. And people voted leave. How is a second referendum going to change that? How is the second referendum going to bring the country together? Think about it. Look at the outcomes. What are the possible outcomes? Well, the possible outcomes are leave win again, which is a high possibility. I do agree with Theresa May when she says some people voted remain who now would vote leave. I do totally agree with that. I happen to be one of them. So what she's saying there is right. Just as many people have changed. And if you look at polling right now, all the polls pretty much have them in the same sort of ballpark as they were the day before the referendum in 2016. So if we do get the same result, are you going to stop then? Of course not. Of course you're not going to stop then. You're going to blame Russia, and you're going to ask for a third referendum. And likewise, if Remain win this time, then the Leave camp are going to be pushing for a third referendum, and they're going to be saying it's done democratic. We are in a lose-lose situation here. All we can do is get on with it, and right now we haven't got people getting on with it. We've got people actually standing in the way of progress. That's how I would answer that question. I really wanted to see how the panel were going to answer that question and statement, but they just happened to ignore the two best statements that week, I thought. Here was the second one.
So I'm a special constable, and what that is a policeman with the same powers as a regular policeman but doesn't get paid. And some people call it insanity, and I tend to agree sometimes.
So do you agree with anything? I
agree all the time. If you're being a police officer and you're not getting paid, then you are insane. Yeah.
You've heard on the panel here.
Well, there's a lot of things I agree with in terms.
Now he's addressing the gang violence issue as well, just to get you up to speed.
In terms of there are socio-economic reasons for it. Got fatherless families. There's poverty in there. There's all sorts of issues. But there's one thing that none of you have mentioned, and it's drugs, and it's government drug policy. When you hear about people stabbing each other over postcodes, they're actually stabbing over each other for control to sell drugs in various postcodes.
What he said there is absolutely correct. It happens in my area. There was somebody actually stabbed last year, not far from me, over this sort of issue. So what he's saying here is up and down the country. It's not just in London. I know it from personal experience.
So what would you do to answer the question to make London
First off,
streets safe?
if you legalised cannabis and regulated cannabis, not
see the people nodding around him.
only would that take a hell of a lot of power and control and money away from criminals, it would free up a hell of a lot of time for police officers, I can tell you that.
See, look at that. Sensible approach, backed up with experience. Round of applause from the audience. They love it. They don't get enough of this. It's on TV anyway.
The amount of times we will stop someone, find a joint on them, very small amount of personal use, we've got to stand there for an hour, fill out community resolution forms.
You find a joint on people and you've got to stand there for an hour and fill out forms. For a joint.
Log into 7 different IT systems which are archaic. Takes up a huge amount of police time. And it just maddens me that no one in government is kind of ballsy enough to actually address drug policy. It doesn't work. We know it doesn't work. What are you going to do about it? Stay silent?
Well, unfortunately, they are going to have to stay silent because our time is up. I'm terribly sorry.
Oh, well, look at that. Can't have the dirty weed discussed on the Beeb. So that was the bad of last week's question time. To support truly honest, independent journalism like this, please go to patreon.com/Gordon Dimmack. You can become a patron of mine for as little as $1 a month, and every dollar helps. I cannot stress that enough. We can't do this without you. Also, you can use any of the avenues on your screen right now to donate, or below. There are many of them. Please make sure you're subscribed. They unsubscribe people every day, so please make sure you are, and click that bell as well so you get a notification of when I drop further videos. Thanks very much for your support. Until next time, peace and take care.